if you're an Irish fan and you're looking for hope, you need a little bit of chaos, because a lot of the teams that are sitting right in front of you have stronger finishes to the season. So they're likely in victory only going to strengthen their position sitting right in front of you. So you need an upset or two. Hello and welcome in. It's Always College Football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy, and it is our Sunday evening edition of Always College Football. It's one of our favorite shows of the week. It's our top 10 takeaways show. We had the opportunity earlier today to give you our rapid reactions, kind of take you through what happened. Well, here's the show where we tell you why it happened and what it means moving forward for some of these teams. Just some bigger picture, landscape type conversations that we love having here on a Sunday evening. A lot that we need to get to. 10 massive takeaways, a lot of shakeups, some dominant performances, a Heisman Trophy odds list that we'll go through, to me, that makes very little sense. But I'll explain why here in just a little bit. We'll talk some conference championship scenarios. We'll also talk about the G5, which to me is about as bonkers and as bananas as it gets, including some of the tiebreaker scenarios in the AAC. You probably want to hear about that because I've never seen anything quite like it. I actually had to go to my outstanding research assistant at ESPN, Jeremy Mills, to help me kind of understand what the heck it means. So we'll talk about some teams that have now entered into the playoff conversation. We'll talk about some teams that flexed and a Jekyll and Hyde performance for the ages. Before we get into the top 10 takeaways, kindly ask all of you guys to go and subscribe to the podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, it's totally fine. Doesn't matter what platform, just go and subscribe. It helps us out a lot. Doesn't take any time to you. Doesn't crowd your podcast inventory. It just helps us out. And it'll allow you to have access to our shows the second we drop them every single day. We also encourage you to go check us out on the ESPN College Football YouTube page. There's lots of great stuff on there for you as well, including several highlights from not even our show, but from other shows. They just do a great job on there as well. So if you love college football, it's a great destination for you. Let's dial it in. Here we go. Top 10 takeaways from week 12 of the college football season. Takeaway number 1. Welcome to the college football playoff party, Oklahoma. They go on the road to Tuscaloosa and not only end Alabama's 8-game win streak, but they snap Alabama's 17-game home winning streak and the first loss for Kalen DeBoer at home in his tenure as the head coach of Alabama. This was a signature Brent Venables type of game. And if you go back and you watch the tape, it was everything that he could have possibly wanted. It was exactly how he probably wants his offense to have a few more than 212 points or 212 yards. But just knowing him, knowing his personality, the fact that his defense won it, I'm sure brings him great pride and great admiration. It was a fantastic defensive effort. And if you look at it statistically, it was all Bama. 406 total yards to just 212. But it was all about being opportunistic, taking advantage of critical mistakes. And guess what? A lot of people say this sometimes. Sometimes more games are lost than won. And I don't think people totally think about that all the time, right? People usually say, well, hang on a second. If a team lost and the other team won, like it should be 50-50. Well, this was about Oklahoma taking advantage of mistakes. And not everybody can do that, by the way. Now, this is tremendous credit to the Sooners because Bama made mistakes and they capitalized. They cashed those mistakes in for 17 points. Eli Bowen got it started. Signature play there in the first quarter. And this was a pressure that Oklahoma ran throughout. I liked this too from Brent Venables in this plan. They really stuck to what was working. Sometimes guys will say, okay, well, that worked. Let's go on to the next wrinkle, right? No, they kept blitzing Kip Lewis right up the middle. And it worked time and time again. And Alabama really never made the adjustment. They never were able to make the change in their protection. And Kip Lewis had a fantastic game in being able to create pressure, led to a couple critical sacks, but it also allowed for Eli Bowen to break on the interception that was taken to the house. A lot was made of our Mason Thomas absence, but Taylor Wine has proven time and time again throughout this season that he is not to be overlooked. And if you look at the sack, he lined up. They had a perfect setup where they had a guy that was on the right tackle, and he was super wide. That's what they do with R. Mason Thomas. They get him really, really wide, and it makes it very hard for that tackle to get deep enough and wide enough to block the end man on the line of scrimmage. But Wine's length and power and speed up the field led to that fumble that was huge. Of course, that was then cashed in for a critical game-winning field goal. You also look at Taylor Wine getting a piece of the field goal at the end of half, enormous as well. I don't think that kick was going to go through the uprights regardless, but maybe his presence in the middle did disrupt the kicker's vision as he was looking at the ball. And finally, Tate Sandell, tremendous performance from him. This guy just continues to be an outstanding weapon. It's like, all right, sounds good. We get to the 38-yard line. We got 3, boys. That's a really comfortable feeling as an offense. It really is. I thought John Mateer had a good game. It was solid. There were a couple misses, but it wasn't a perfect performance by any stretch. There was also a couple drops in this game as well. Satania had one drop in particular there to the right side, which was not a huge play. It would have been 6-7 yard gain, but it stalled a drive. So I thought the offense, there was some good, but there's capabilities of going a little higher because it does look like their quarterback is looking much healthier, more confident, and is becoming the playmaker that we thought he would be after the first 4 games of the season. I also think that the committee needs to factor in with Oklahoma the fact that their quarterback was playing with a broken thumb. And as a result, the offense maybe didn't look so good throughout most of October. I think that will factor in, and I think that will help Oklahoma in the long term when they're evaluating their playoff candidacy. Of course, Oklahoma has 2 home games in front of them. They got Missouri this week. They have LSU the following week to finish off the regular season. They win those 2 games. Not only will they be in the field, I think in all likelihood, given the strength of schedule, they will be hosting a playoff game. At the very worst, they're in Norman, Oklahoma in December. For Alabama, everything is still in front of them. You can't dwell on the mistakes that were made in this game. This was a very disappointing loss, but if you look at it, and if you're looking at it from an Alabama vantage point, you're sitting there saying, okay, you're able to move the football against a really good defense. You're able to actually, I know the numbers won't suggest improvements in the run game, but the run game was a little better for Alabama. And Ty Simpson, the big thing for him, he was really good throughout the first 8, 9, 10 games. There was a lot of really positive moments, but the last couple weeks, there have been a couple misses, just a few misses. And if you look at the pressure that Oklahoma was able to apply, they were able to blitz Alabama on 16 out of Ty Simpson's 48 dropbacks. So about a third of those dropbacks were going against the blitz. Several of those dropbacks, by the way, and several of those blitzes, they had a free hitter, which is a problem. So you got to get that addressed for sure. And if you look at the second half, that's when things really ramped up. You saw the pressure start to go up significantly in the second half. They blitzed on 8 of his 15 dropbacks there in the second half. So they handled it pretty well early, but in the second half, 3 sacks were taken, just 2 completions on 5 attempts. And the off-target throws, I counted 11 in this game. That's not what you're expecting because Ty Simpson has been so accurate, has been so good in taking advantage throughout the first few weeks. But now I think some of that pressure might have gotten to him just a little bit, especially on some of the downfield throws. That's where things can tighten up a hair as well. Everything's in front of Alabama. It just makes the Iron Bowl that much more important. Going on the road, getting a win against Auburn, you can still punch your ticket to the SEC championship game, and you can still obviously get to the college football playoff. So Alabama's still in a very good spot. But this was really more about Oklahoma capitalizing on mistakes and getting themselves in great position to make it to the 12-team playoff. Takeaway number 2, Georgia is peaking at the right time. I mean, they are really going in the right direction these last couple weeks. They are ascending. And when you look at what just transpired with Alabama, for example, and how Alabama let mistakes kind of get in the way, Georgia has been really smart all season long. They haven't made a ton of mistakes. They haven't had a lot of issues. And this was a very competitive game for 3 quarters. And it was really a lot of fun to watch, frankly. This was loving going through this tape earlier today. It was really, really fun. And this was a war along the line of scrimmage there early on. And if you look at it, man, it was one player here or there. It was a great open field tackle. It was a play here by this safety that was coming up and fitting the run. It was a lot of mistakes from Texas too. There were some drops, some very uncharacteristic mistakes from the Longhorns, but it was very impressive to see the switch flip there in the fourth quarter. This is now Georgia's 6th straight victory, their 3rd win over Texas in the last 2 years, including the SEC championship game last year. Gunnar Stockton was again outstanding. Accounts for 5 touchdowns. He's one of the most efficient players I've seen in quite some time. With what he does with his arm, with what he does with his legs, with how smart he is when delivering the football, where he's throwing it, the windows that he hits, the guy just doesn't miss throws. If you watch him, I mean, there are very few throws that are significantly off target. Almost every throw that he makes is catchable, which is pretty remarkable. And I think he's playing at an outrageously high level. And what's paying off for Mike Bobo, their offensive coordinator, early in the season, they were very committed to running the football. And they are still, by the way, still very committed to running the football. This is a run-first operation. But because of that commitment, you're now seeing a very strong commitment to play action. If you look at their play action numbers, over half of his attempts were off play action. And on his touchdown passes, he had 4 of them. 3 of those 4 touchdown passes were off play action as well. And even the rushing score was on a rollout too, right? Off a play action fake. So he has been really good. And on this day, those 15 attempts off play action, he was 14 of 15. So the commitment to the run is getting a ton of bite from the secondary, getting a ton of bite from the linebackers, and it's allowing guys to uncover. So you also look too, it's a creating big plays because of that commitment, these guys are now getting nosy, which is allowing Stockton to push the ball down the field. He was 4 of 6 on throws that were thrown more than 15 yards downfield for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. So very, very effective in this game off play action. And that's something that can continue to build because they have great juice at wide receiver. They have outstanding tight ends. So it's not surprising that this group is really starting to round into form with their way they're marrying up the run game to the pass game. It should all be perfect in a perfect mesh, and it's starting to become that way for Georgia. As far as their defense is concerned, they really squeezed things down there in the second half. They really did a good job there, especially in the fourth quarter. Just bottling up the run, squeezing the pocket, making Arch Manning uncomfortable. Thought there were some opportunities there for Texas, but they just couldn't make them because the level of discomfort that it felt like Arch Manning had throughout the game. This was a really solid defensive performance, I thought, from the get-go, especially on the first drive. Even just allowing the field goal on the first drive, you can see the adjustments that are always made by Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart. They deserve immense credit. The best coaching move in this game, though, was the surprise onside kick. Extremely aggressive, massive moment, and all of a sudden, you have the 21-10 lead. You feel like, okay, you can kind of take a deep breath, right? After that point, you would think that, yes, while things are chaotic between the hedges and the crowd is invigorated, you can immediately end the game right there. You don't just take a deep breath. You don't relax. Instead, you go for the jugular. That's exactly what they did by Peyton Woodring hitting a perfect onside kick that completely caught the left side of Texas's return team off guard. They get the recovery. Next thing you know, it's a 28-10 lead in the blink of an eye. For Texas, I think this probably eliminates them from college football playoff conversation. People have talked for a while now about the possibility of a 3-loss Texas team maybe making it in the field. But right now, it's hard for me to envision Texas getting into the mix if everyone else in front of them holds serve. I think they need help. And help might come. It, of course, starts, though, by beating Arkansas this upcoming week and then beating Texas A&M in convincing fashion on Black Friday. But there were way too many drop passes in this game, way too many mistakes in this game. They were solid, but you have to be great to beat Georgia. You have to execute at a high level. And when you have opportunities against the Dogs, you have to seize them. Texas didn't. And as a result, Georgia continues to march along and should be in a great position to secure possibly a top 4 seed in the college football playoff. Takeaway number 3. I think Texas A&M just delivered the most Jekyll and Hyde performance I've seen. To see a team that is sitting there down 30-3 at halftime, a deficit in which no SEC team has come back from since 2004. They are a combined 0-286 SEC teams in that scenario to overcome that 27-point deficit and to make the biggest comeback win in school history. It's the largest comeback win in the FBS this year. And if you look at it, no SEC team has done anything even remotely close to this in quite a while, especially against Power 4 competition. The largest comeback in A&M history was a 21-point deficit. That was in the 2013 Chick-fil-A Bowl. That was against Duke. That was with Johnny Manziel. So it just goes to show you how absurd this rally was. And it was so Jekyll and Hyde, and it was perfectly embodied by their quarterback, Marcel Reed. Now, you look at the final stat line, 439 yards, 3 touchdowns. That tells just half the story because the start was not at all what you wanted. He started by completing just 6 of 19 passes in the first half. He had 2 interceptions in the first half. And by the way, those 2 interceptions, it could have been 4. There were a handful of plays which, like, South Carolina defenders had hands on the ball and just couldn't quite reel it in. Tip it up, couldn't reel it in. But man, when he got going, 16 of 20, 3 touchdowns in the second half. If you look at it, though, the fumble that was scooped and scored as well, we didn't even really talk about that. It wasn't all on Marcel Reed. I thought there were a couple drop passes. I thought there were a couple missed opportunities. There was one, for example, in the back of the end zone where he wasn't on the same page with the wide receiver. So yes, some of it was inaccurate. Some of it was bad decisions. Some of it was poorly executed throws. But it wasn't all on Marcel Reed. You also, by the way, miss a 24-yard field goal, right? I mean, what are the odds of that? And even just a field goal in that scenario, you're sitting there thinking just one of those like, oh my gosh, when it rains, it pours type of situations. Well, boom, get it to halftime, you survive. And it started there early in the second half. It all started with that 4th and 12 scramble. That was maybe the play of the year for Texas A&M because it looked like there for a minute Marcel Reed was going to be bottled up. They had good coverage downfield. He's one-on-one with the defender. Looked like he was going to get tackled there for a minute. He sidesteps him, somehow finds a way out around the left edge, and he gets the conversion 2 plays later, 27-yard touchdown to Williams. And then a little later, you get the 4th and 2 conversion. Boom, the immediate play after that, touchdown on the deep ball to Bethel Roman. So 2 masterfully executed 4th down conversions that led to 14 points. You also look, too, at some of the other throws that were made throughout the game. The beautiful fake quarterback run to Borkature right there, tight end, falls into the end zone. Very precise in the second half. And what was even more remarkable, it's not like it was flawless by any stretch. I mean, there were a couple times where they were behind the sticks. They're sitting there in a 1st and 20 because of a penalty. Sitting there in a 2nd and 18 because of the penalty. On both those plays, they went right down and got it all back immediately. Now, the turnover on the goal line was disgusting. I don't want to see a play like that anymore, but it does happen. I mean, that could have, of course, ended the game right there. But A&M's defense, very porous there early on. They did a great job, though, I think, in the second half of applying pressure. But if you really look at it as a whole, it's not like South Carolina had consistent offensive output. Yes, the first half was pretty good. They ran it okay. They had a couple nice plays from Lenora Sellers. But there's really just 2 massive plays. You get the 80-yard catch and run. You have the long throw down the left sideline. That's 14 points right there. You, of course, had the defensive score. There was really only 1 or 2 big drives from South Carolina. So the defense was not nearly as bad as I anticipated. They just can't allow those big plays because that's one thing. If you're going to beat A&M, you're going to probably have to manufacture some big plays, and A&M let them manufacture those big plays. So that's really kind of about it. The other thing, too, that 4th and 1 stop on the first drive of the second half, probably the biggest play of the game for the Aggie defense. Because if South Carolina, first drive of the second half, they can go down and score, might be a completely different conversation. Instead, they get the stop, and next thing you know, the comeback is on. So outstanding performance there in the second half from Texas A&M. So to flip the switch like that was remarkable. Man, Jekyll and Hyde, I'm not sure I can ever think back to a game that I've covered or watched or studied that was that much of a change from one half to the next. Takeaway number 4, the SEC's path to getting 5 teams in the college football playoff is becoming very clear. Imagine yesterday's results in the 4-team playoff era. Imagine what the reaction would be, right? Especially had South Carolina somehow held on against Texas A&M. We would be losing our mind. We'd be saying, oh, cannibalization. It's, the SEC it's too chaotic. There's no great team, right? But in the 12-team format, yesterday's results, it's almost like the SEC is kind of tailor-made because of the depth and the talent and the quality that you're getting in the top 8 teams in the league, it feels like, from top to bottom. Man, just so exciting. In the 12-team playoff era now, we had talked, is it possible for the SEC to get 5? That can't. There's no way, right? I mean, people had even hypothesized the SEC getting 6 in. Like, I don't see that as a realistic possibility. It feels way too aggressive. Unless something absolutely insane happens, I think 5 is about as many as they can get. But Oklahoma's upset of Alabama was the key. So if you look at it, with Oklahoma now knocking off Alabama, you have really high-quality teams that are all likely going to be ranked in the top 7, 8, 9, 10, depending on how it all shakes out. Alabama's sitting there at 8-2, and despite the loss, still very much in control of their own destiny when it comes to punching a ticket to the 12-team playoff. Well, with the win for Oklahoma, they now have some massive wins, by the way, at Alabama, against Michigan at home, at Tennessee. They're now in full control of their own destiny as well. So if you look at it, you got A&M, who is undefeated. In all likelihood, if they can take care of business this week, which they will, I don't even remember who they play, but it shouldn't be somebody that gives them many fits whatsoever. They go on the road to Texas. Even in defeat, they're a lock more than likely for the college football playoff at 11-1, right? So we can just go ahead and say, all right, Texas A&M, you can go ahead and book your tickets. Now, do you have a bye? Where are you going? Don't book your tickets yet because we don't know, but maybe just leave either the 1st of January in 2026, leave that date available, and or leave that weekend before Christmas available as well, because you'll be playing. It's just a matter of when you tee it up for the first time in the postseason. I think with Georgia, dominant one-loss team, they're in a great spot at this point. They're 9-1, that one loss coming to Alabama, so they're not in control of their own destiny as it relates to getting to the SEC championship game, but a win this week, which they'll get, and if they can take care of business against Georgia Tech, they should be in a great spot as well. I think at this point, even if they lose to Georgia Tech, they're in a really good spot. I think in all likelihood, Georgia's going to the postseason as well. Ole Miss, have they officially secured a college football playoff berth? They're 10-1. They quietly survived a scare from the Florida Gators, something they couldn't do last year. They should be in great position, even if they lose the Egg Bowl to Mississippi State. But I think Mississippi State's kind of trending in the wrong direction, especially on defense. Ole Miss should be in a good spot there as well. They might even have a case to be made to not just get a home playoff game, but maybe even a first-round bye if they sit there at 11-1. Looking at Oklahoma and Alabama, those two teams are also likely going to be in the field. And we could see a scenario where the SEC gets one team, maybe two teams, a first-round bye, and they could have 3 teams that are hosting home playoff games if their teams are ranked 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, we'll see exactly how that works. As far as the 6-team conversation, Vanderbilt is about the only team that can possibly get there. I don't see a path, not at this point, for the Vanderbilt Commodores to get to within striking distance of the 12-team field. As far as the SEC championship game scenarios are concerned, okay, Georgia's scenario to get to the SEC title would be an Alabama loss to Auburn or a Texas A&M loss to Texas with an Ole Miss win and the strength of schedule win against Alabama. So Georgia does have a path, but they need some help from A&M and from the Alabama Crimson Tide. For Alabama, their way to Atlanta is a win against Auburn and a Texas A&M loss, or a win plus an Ole Miss loss, or a win plus a win in the strength of schedule against the Georgia Bulldogs. So you got that. Basically, if Bama wins, they should be in a really good spot to get to Atlanta for the SEC championship game. And then for Texas A&M, just win, baby. Pretty simple. They can also lock up a spot with an Alabama and an Ole Miss loss as well. And then for Ole Miss, they need a whole lot of help. They need to win against Mississippi State. They need Texas A&M to lose to Texas. And they need Alabama to lose to Auburn. So Ole Miss can make it, but the path is a lot more narrow than some of the other teams that are sitting there with one loss in conference. Takeaway number 5. Just survive and advance when you're in the field. Right? Ole Miss has now won 11 straight at home. They have clinched their third straight 10-win season. Just think about that for a moment, by the way. Think about what Ole Miss has become under Lane Kiffin. To win 10 games in the SEC 3 straight years, it's the greatest stretch in school history. So just embrace, enjoy, and appreciate what you have right now, because my goodness, to overcome that 24-10 deficit going into the fourth quarter was pretty remarkable, because it was feeling a lot like deja vu there for a minute, wasn't it? Felt a lot like last year. It's like, oh my goodness, why can't we crack the Florida Gator code? Well, they did. They are now 2-0 when trailing entering the fourth quarter this year. And it's the first time all season that they trailed at halftime. And it's the run game. What makes Ole Miss different this year? It's the ability to hand the ball off to a running back. And this running back is Kewan Lacey. He's now amazing. I mean, he went for 224. So to run the ball that effectively against a Florida front that's pretty decent says an awful lot. It was the 8th best performance running the football in Ole Miss history. And the first time they had a guy eclipse the 220-yard mark since 2010. Amazing performance from Kewan Lacey. The USC Trojans, they come back, storm back to knock off the Iowa Hawkeyes. They were down 11 at halftime. They're now 3-3 under Lincoln Riley when they're trailing by double digits at halftime, which is wild, by the way, but just goes to show you the firepower that SC has. Now, big one coming up next week when they go on the road to a top 10 Oregon team. If SC can win that, they'll be in fantastic shape to make a charge at a possible college football playoff berth. They have lost 6 straight against top 10 opponents. They haven't won a game against a top 10 team since 2019. Makai Lemon continues to do amazing things, 10 for 153. He's been outrageous. Jaden Mayava goes for 254 in the game as well. It's his 8th game this year with 250 plus passing yards. That's the most by an SC player through his first 10 games in the last 30 years, by the way. No, it's tied for the most. The others, Cody Kessler in 2014, Matt Leinart in 2005, and the Heisman Trophy winner, Caleb Williams, back in 2023. So Iowa's looking at this, man, when they've had a lead, by the way, in the past, the 47 games prior when they had a double-digit lead, they were 46-1. They did lose last year against Iowa State in similar fashion. They're now 0-4 against ranked teams this season, 6-0 against unranked teams, but it was really more about SC getting things going there in the second half, and Makai Lemon and company, Jaden Mayava and company, taking the game over in what was kind of nasty conditions there in the ball game. Georgia Tech survives against Boston College. They're now 6-1 in ACC play. They're tied with Virginia atop the ACC standings. They were in a big hole, down 11 there in the fourth quarter. It's their third double-digit fourth quarter comeback under Brent Key, which is amazing. That's since October of 2022. Haynes King was outstanding down the stretch. And it's always been his legs. We've talked so much about his legs and how good he is as a runner. I think we're starting to lose track of just how good he is as a thrower as well, and how good their weapons are. These guys have weapons now on the outside with what Malik Rutherford is now doing, with what Eric Rivers has done, the transfer. They became the first Georgia Tech receiving duo to have 100-plus receiving yards in the game since Calvin Johnson and Demarius Bilbo against North Carolina in 2005. So it was one of the best receiving games we've seen from Georgia Tech in 2 decades. So survive and advance. It was not pretty, but you got the job done, and you continue to march along en route to a possible ACC championship game berth. And then Michigan, they knock off Northwestern. It wasn't pretty. Their kicker Zvada was 1 for 3 on field goals, but he made that 31-yarder as time expired. And if you look at it, man, this was about as sloppy as it gets for Michigan to have 5 turnovers in the ball game and to find a way to win. is absurd. They hadn't had 5 turnovers and 1 in a ball game since 2010. So it goes to show you how improbable this was. Andrew Marsh continues to do amazing things. He's become a real go-to guy in the passing game. He goes 12 for 189. It's the most by a Michigan freshman since at least 1995. Bryce Underwood is coming along as well. Wasn't pretty, couple picks in the game, but for the most part, you see his progress being made at times. And Jordan Marshall shows that he can still be a very much a go-to guy in the run game, even though Justice Haynes is going to be the celebrated savior. Jordan Marshall doesn't take a backseat to many. He goes for 142 in the performance. So very impressive from Michigan being able to get the job done when they had way less than their best performance. Takeaway number 6. Notre Dame is a playoff team, but they don't control their own fate. So let's start with this game first and foremost. They've now won 8 in a row. Okay, you had the 0-2 start, both losses by a combined 4 points. Well, since those 2 losses, the win streak that began on September 20th, they have outscored their opponents by 205 points. That trails only Indiana with the margin of victory that we've seen from the Irish on this 8-0 run. Jeremiah Love was outrageous. And what I loved most about this game and watching it back, I was really curious if Pitt, who came into the game as one of the top run defenses in the country, I thought Pitt would actually kind of be pretty good between the tackles defensively. I thought they would make some plays in the backfield defensively. I thought they could create some problems for the Notre Dame rushing attack because they are aggressive, they do blitz, they do move, they make life difficult. Well, it didn't matter because if you look at the performance from Jeremiah Love and this rushing attack, they went for 122 on runs between the tackles. So just between the tackles to go for 122. Now, that's the most that the Panthers have allowed all season long. If you look at CJ Carr, it was fine. It was some really, really high highs and a couple of plays where it wasn't great. He also, I thought, showed some maturity, taking advantage of some free plays. You get Pitt, who's an aggressive group, to kind of jump. Now, all of a sudden, you got free opportunities to take some shots. They were able to do that. He was 3 for 3 for 88 yards and a touchdown on throws that traveled more than 15 yards. And like I said, 2 of those completions on those free plays that I just referenced. It was really more in this game, though, as much as I was impressed with the run game and Jeremiah Love and the way they controlled the line of scrimmage at times. It was more about how the defense continued to just apply pressure. It felt like Mason Heinschel was running for his life the entire game. They pressured him on nearly half of his dropbacks. On those pressures, Heinschel went just 3 of 12 and was sacked 4 times. So it was all about the pressures. It was all about the defensive line. It was all about this invigorated pass rush that early on was a bit of a work in progress, but now you're starting to see some fruition, some of the fruits of your labor with what you've tried to emphasize in the last 7 or 8 games. This was a must-win situation. They had to have it, and it had to be convincing. They just completely bullied the Panthers from start to finish. But here's where things get very tricky, because if you look at Notre Dame, it'll be very interesting to see where the College Football Playoff Committee has them on Tuesday's rankings. Because right now is about as high as they can probably go on their own accord. They are kind of dependent on what happens right in front of them. And the big key for the Irish is not so much that they're going to be in the field. I feel very confident that Notre Dame at 10-2 will be in the college football playoff field. But the goal for the Irish, like we've talked about from the beginning, the goal for them is to get a home playoff game, to get another game in South Bend there in the middle of December and make whoever they're playing travel to cold weather in a hostile setting. Well, we need to know where they're going to be this week, because a game against a 3-7 Syracuse team and then finishing up against a 3-7 Stanford team is not going to help your strength of schedule. If anything, it's going to significantly hurt your strength of schedule. So they're going back, but they're very much at the mercy of what happens right in front of them. What happens between USC and Oregon? If I'm Notre Dame, I'm going to root very hard for the USC Trojans this week. Even though it's a rival, USC beating Oregon and getting them out of the way would really strengthen the possibility of me getting a home playoff game. I also need the Auburn Tigers to knock off the Alabama Crimson Tide, because that gets one more team out of the way. I would love it if Oklahoma were to potentially lose to a Missouri or to an LSU. That's what you need. If you're an Irish fan and you're looking for hope, you need a little bit of chaos, because a lot of the teams that are sitting right in front of you have stronger finishes to the season. So they're likely in victory only going to strengthen their position sitting right in front of you. So you need an upset or two. It does complicate things just a little bit. But here's the good news for Notre Dame. Texas lost. So you now no longer have to worry about the Longhorns possibly being in the mix, because that would have been another team that could potentially jump right in front of you had they been victorious on the road in Athens. They're in a great spot, but it will be fascinating on Tuesday to see exactly where they are going to be, because that's probably going to be where they are from this point going forward. One more final thing on Notre Dame, and we'll talk about this in just a little bit. There needs to be a lot of attention paid to Jeremiah Love's Heisman Trophy campaign. I don't know if he's going to have the platform. I don't know if he's going to have the opportunities down the stretch. And I don't know if the numbers will have him in a position to possibly get to New York. Because if you look at guys that have won the Heisman Trophy or have been in the Heisman Trophy mix at the running back spot, you got to go for like 2,000 yards. And he's not going to get there, barring something completely unforeseen. But if we're really talking about the most outstanding player in college football, he deserves a really good, long, hard look, because I think he is absolutely in that conversation. Takeaway number 7, there was some dominance on display this week. We'll start with the top team in the land. It's the Ohio State Buckeyes. They are now 10-0 for the 4th time under Ryan Day. Remember, he took over back in 2019, so it's like 10-0 is like a birthright. If you are an Ohio State fan, they've won 9 straight games by 17 plus points. That's the longest active streak in the FBS. A 48-10 clinic over UCLA. Their most points in a conference game in nearly 4 years. That was against Indiana, ironically. Very different Indiana team back then. I love what we're now seeing from the run game. It's already been there all year, but I think that's a group that can continue to grow with what Bo Jackson might inevitably become. And the win improves Ryan Day to 80-10 in his career. It's the second best mark in FBS history behind Walter Camp. Pretty good company to keep if you're Ryan Day. They just keep moving along. Nico Iamaleava not being out there kind of didn't give UCLA much of an opportunity. So a dominant performance and an expected dominant performance from Ohio State. The second-ranked Indiana Hoosiers are off to their first ever 11-0 start. They pound Wisconsin 31-7. They have an 11-game win streak. It's the longest in program history. They will finish up the regular season against Purdue on Thanksgiving weekend. And the Heisman Trophy favorite now is Fernando Mendoza, 4 touchdowns. He now has 30 passing touchdowns this season. And if you look on the other side, too, for Wisconsin, it clinches back-to-back losing seasons for the first time since an 8-season streak that spanned from 1985 to 1992. They have now dropped 11 straight against AP top 5 opponents. So very impressive performance from the Hoosiers yet again. The number 6 ranked Texas Tech Red Raiders, they dominate UCF 48-9 there in Lubbock. First time that they have held back-to-back opponents under 10 points since 2000. And it's the first time they've done it against Big 12 opponents. And I think this Texas Tech group, man, they're just getting better and better and better. And I was not really that surprised with the performance yesterday against an embattled UCF football team. But the level of dominance is always going to jump off the tape when you take a peek at it. BYU bounced back in pretty impressive fashion. They throttled TCU 44-13. And what's most impressive about this is that Josh Hoover, the quarterback for TCU, he's been very good this year. I mean, he has had an outstanding season. He goes 10 of 23 with 2 picks. And it was the first time in his 29 career starts that Hoover completed less than half of his passes. So that should put things in perspective, just how good this defense was against a good quarterback and a talented wide receiver core. The Utah Utes, they continue to just roll along, man. But it was really the big plays, too. 3 plays on offense that went for 60-plus yards. They also had a play on defense that went for 60. That's their most that they've had in the last 20 years. They have now scored 45 points for the third consecutive game. So this offense, they're just starting to really show what they're capable of. And the freshman quarterback, Bird Ficklin, got in the action as well. 166 yards on just 6 carries. And Devin Dampier, in just limited action, throws a couple touchdown passes. Number 19, Virginia. They are now 9-2 on the heels of their big win on the road against the Duke Blue Devils. Cavs now have won 9 games. That's their second most in program history. They had 10-win season back in 1989. They last won 9 games in 2019 and was probably the most dominant box score amongst 2 decent teams with something on the line of the weekend. Virginia outgained Duke by 285 yards. That's the largest yards margin against an FBS opponent for Virginia since 2004. And that was against Akron. So it just goes to show you how one-sided that affair was as well. And the top-ranked ACC team right now, the Miami Hurricanes, they go for 581 yards on offense. That's their most in a conference game in the last 5 years. They just destroyed NC State. And Carson Beck, man, he's getting back on track. That's his 5th career game of 250 through the air, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks, and his first in a year. He did it last year against Georgia Tech. So Miami flexing a bit, but still needing some help with some of the teams right in front of them. Takeaway number 8. The ACC continues to kind of blow my mind, but it's beginning to make a little bit of sense. All right, you now have 6 teams. 6. That's right. You heard that correctly. There are 6 teams that are currently alive to reach the ACC championship game, but the 2 that are in most control, that are in, they handle their business, they're in, that's Virginia and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech can clinch a spot in the ACC championship game with a win against Pittsburgh at home this weekend. They also can clinch if there are some losses by some other teams. But with Virginia, they can clinch by a loss against Duke losing, Pitt losing, SMU losing. So if you look at some of the odds right now, the odds for the teams in the ACC to make the title, Virginia has about 78% chance. So they're in a really good spot right now to make it to Charlotte. Georgia Tech is in there at 58%. So those 2 teams far and away in the best position to make it to the ACC championship game. SMU is 3rd, believe it or not, at 39%. So they're in the mix as well. Miami, just 7% to make it to the title game. So those are the top 4. Pitt still alive. They're 7% chance. They got to win out. Duke's still alive. They're at 11% chance. They, of course, have to win out as well. So if you look at everything, Georgia Tech is the favorite. Odds makers agree at plus 175. Virginia is at plus 275. But to think we are now sitting there in week 13, coming up this upcoming weekend, and yet there is a team, the favorite team in the ACC is still plus money, is pretty wild. So starting to clarify a bit, but still a lot to figure out when it comes to the ACC championship game race. Probably the most intriguing race right now in all of college football. Takeaway number 9. The group of 5 has been completely blown up because of what transpired with USF. They had a very untimely loss, 41-38 to Navy. They had entered the day as the number 1 ranked G5 team. They had a 38% chance to reach the college football playoff. And now they're sitting at 1%. After they lose to Navy in heartbreaking fashion, they tried to storm back. They just couldn't do it. Remember, they were ranked in the college football playoff top 25. And the biggest beneficiary of South Florida's defeat is James Madison, who cruised by Appalachian State 58-10. They're now 9-1 this year. They are 7-0 in the Sun Belt. So with that win and Coastal Carolina's loss, the Dukes have officially clinched their division, so they will be playing in the Sun Belt Championship game. And if they can win that game, they're in a great spot to potentially make the college football playoff. And if you look at the rest of what's going on right now in the AAC, because we had all kind of thought the champion of the AAC, they're likely going to be in the mix. They're probably going to be the team from the G5 that's going to make it to the postseason. Well, now not so much. And if you look at how the AAC championship game and the tiebreakers are decided, it's kind of all based on college football playoff rankings and composite computer averages, meaning they take into account S&P Plus, they take into account strength of record, KPI, sports sorts. Of course, there's not divisions in the AAC. So they're basically going to kind of say, all right, College Football Playoff Committee, you got it. And then we're going to take all the computers and basically do the BCS formula, if you will, to determine who are going to be the two top teams. Of course, that's if everybody's kind of jumbled. But right now, with the AAC, it kind of is that way right now. If you're looking at it, it's appearing like Tulane is in the best spot right now, them in North Texas, to potentially get to that AAC title game. They are 8-2, Tulane. Their resume does have 2 wins over Power 4 opponents, so they do have a pretty strong case if they can somehow find a way to get into the AAC championship game. And then North Texas, who's sitting at 9-1, but that one loss came to USF. But now with USF losing, North Texas and that head-to-head won't matter as much. They're in a great spot as well. So we'll see how the AAC shakes up. But man, the opportunity is wide open for James Madison. Like I said, they are playing on Conference Championship Saturday. That's a lock. It's just who will they play? And it's looking like it'll probably be Southern Miss, who can clinch the West Division from the Sun Belt with a win against South Alabama and a loss by the Troy Trojans. We'll keep you posted because the G5 is wild, as crazy as it's ever been, and it's really going to be a lot of fun to see who gets that last college football playoff spot. Takeaway number 10. The Heisman Trophy race continues to be up for grabs. Now, for the first time all season, there is now an odds-on favorite in the Heisman Trophy market. Fernando Mendoza is now at minus 120 to win the award. And entering Saturday, he was sitting there at plus 160. So his odds improved greatly after the 4-touchdown performance against Wisconsin. Another guy who saw his Heisman stock kind of tumble was Ty Simpson. He entered into Saturday's action at 6-1. He was the 3rd best odds. Well, now he sits at 150-1 after the loss to Oklahoma. Here's what the market looks like. I just referenced where Fernando Mendoza is. And right behind him, it's Julian Sand, who entered the day at plus 185. And even though he had a really strong performance like he always does, he now sits at plus 225. So his odds actually got worse, but I think it's partly because of what transpired with Fernando Mendoza and the performance that he had. His odds climbing led to Julian Sand dipping. Marcel Reed entered into Saturday's action at plus 850. He's now sitting at plus 550. So his odds strengthened just a bit. But the biggest mover of the weekend was Gunnar Stockton, who went from 40-1 to now 20-1. That's a guy I would be looking at long and hard when it comes to winning the possible award. Because let's be real, with 950 voters in the Heisman Trophy, a lot of those voters, by the way, probably don't need votes, just being honest. As a Heisman Trophy voter myself, I don't feel like you ever need 950 people to determine who the most outstanding player is. I think you could, if you can decide the college football playoff with 12 or 13 people, we can probably decide the Heisman Trophy with, 50, 60, 70, 100, whatever. Certainly not 950. But what it is it's kind of a popularity contest, as weird as that may sound. And the guy right now, down the stretch, that's going to have the biggest platforms is probably going to be Julian Sand. Why is that? Because Julian Sand still has a game against Michigan, a Michigan team that is still sitting there at 8-2. That game's going to be widely consumed. Everybody knows that at Michigan and Ohio State game, everybody in the world will be watching that game at noon Eastern time on Fox on the Saturday after Thanksgiving rivalry week. So everybody will watch that game. That'll probably have 15 million viewers, however many it does. And then the following week, he'll probably be playing against the number 1 or number 2 ranked Indiana Hoosiers. Depending on if Indiana jumps up, they probably won't. But at worst, you're playing against a top 2 team. That's another opportunity to have a, quote, Heisman moment. So Julian Sand has some big platforms to play on and to impress the voters here down the stretch. Whereas Fernando Mendoza might not have that same type of platform prior to the Big Ten title game. And for Marcel Reed and Gunnar Stockton, things are looking like those two teams could match up in the SEC championship game. If they do, Could the winner have a good enough performance to vault in front of the guy in the Big Ten that might have an even bigger platform, considering it's 1 versus 2? Diego Pavia still remains in the mix. They didn't even play this past weekend, but he went from 25-1 to now 22-1. Haynes King had a big move as well, 150-1 to now 30-1, but still a long shot. Big opportunities, though, coming up for Haynes King if they can get to the ACC championship game. And he'll, of course, have a huge audience when playing against the Georgia Bulldogs on Black Friday. But the guy whose numbers still blow my mind is Jeremiah Love. Jeremiah Love is currently sitting there at 40-1. And this is not me, jumping on the table, vouching for Jeremiah Love to be on everyone's ballot as the number one guy. But answer me this. Right now, tell me the difference. Just being honest here. Tell me the biggest difference between Julian Sand and Fernando Mendoza. They're pretty similar, right? Both super efficient. They both play in the Big Ten. They both have had remarkably great seasons, but they're very similar, right? Well, tell me the difference right now between Marcel Reed and Gunnar Stockton. Well, a lot of really good moments for both, right? Same conference. They both sit there as the number 3 and number 4 guys when it comes to the Heisman odds. Those guys are also very similar, so I can understand why those guys are kind of bunched. You can even throw Diego Pavia in that mix, whose odds are comparable to that of Gunnar Stockton. So those guys you can kind of put into a bit of a bunch as well. Tell me a running back right now that is close to Jeremiah Love. I don't think there is one. So if we are looking at the gap that's now been created from Jeremiah Love to the second best guy, and there's a handful of great backs in college football, by the way. There's a ton of great backs in college football. But it just goes to show you how elite Jeremiah Love has become. And I think the gap that exists between him and the next best guy should thrust him into the Heisman Trophy conversation. Now, will he win it? Probably not, especially when you take into account he will not play on Conference Championship Saturday. So you have Marcel Reed, Gunnar Stockton, Julian Sand, Fernando Mendoza. Those guys will all play on the Saturday that's 24 hours before all these ballots are due. So those guys will have one last chance to make a huge impression on the Heisman Trophy voter pool. Jeremiah Love won't have that. So I think it's highly unlikely that he's going to have the numbers, nor will he have the voter support to win the award, but he needs to be considered, just considering how elite he's been when compared to the other running backs in college football this year. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Continue to encourage all of you guys to like the podcast, to rate the podcast, to subscribe to the podcast. We always appreciate the support you guys have shown the show. We also appreciate you checking us out on the ESPN College Football YouTube page as well. For all of us here at ACF, another great Sunday in the books of watching tape, getting back to it, making some takeaways, and just diving all in, man. I know you guys love it. I love it as well. That's why we're here. That's why we grind here on Sundays, to make sure that you guys are as prepared as humanly possible to have great conversations at your workplace tomorrow when you guys are talking college football. So we love you guys and we appreciate you. So for all of us here at Always College Football, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, intern Sam, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day, and remember, it's always college football.
Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.